Hello, so usual disclaimer, enjoy these, learn from them, but don't practice on anybody, please. So we've got a mini compilation today with a couple of corns for you. So we're going to start off with this one, which we call an interdigital corn because it's in between the digits. These come generally through pressure. So as you can see, it's quite a lumpy joint on that second toe there. So that joint is pressing against the big toe and it is causing this build-up of callus, which is hard skin. And often then there's like a corny sort of central core to it as well. The interdigital corns, also known as soft corns, because they can get quite soggy and what we call macerated, which is basically soggy, in between the toes because the sweat doesn't evaporate quite the same from in between the toes. But not all interdigital corns are soft or soggy. Like you see with this gentleman, it was actually quite hard, just like normal callus there. There's quite a big gap in between the toes there so that any sweat is evaporating and so the area remains dry. So as you can see, I'm just removing all the bulk and the hard skin from there. Sometimes, because this is a long-standing thing, the tissue underneath becomes rather disorganised, not like normal tissue. So you can get like little blood vessels, etc., pushed up into the area. As you can see from it's created this big kind of sort of fleshy area. It's what we call a bursa, which sits over that knobbly joint, and that's developed to kind of ease the pressure and discomfort, but can actually add to it. Not much on the inside of the big toe, but what he does have is what we call apical callus, because it's on the apex of the toe, which means the top. So you can get calluses and corns anywhere where you're getting pressure. So when you're getting apical callus or corns, that is purely down to pressure on the end of the toe. So when you're weight bearing, and often that's down to a hammering of the toe. So where the toe starts to retract and bend so that the knuckle comes up higher and the end of the toe comes lower. So when you're walking, there's a whole lot more pressure on the very end of the toe where there isn't as much padding because the padding is on the underneath part, not right on the end. So there are many things we can do to help prevent that. We can basically look at reducing that retraction, often by supporting the toe underneath so that the end bit kind of dangles over the top, so we can prop the toe up there. We can use various devices to do that. Insoles can be helpful, but over time, and so in older populations where this issue hasn't been addressed, that toe can become fixed in that position. So it's no longer mobile at all. So you can't actually physically straighten the toe. The bone has kind of set, if you like, in that retracted position so that there is always sort of pressure on the end of that toe. Like I say, that's where devices and everything do come in helpful, but we're limited to what you can actually provide because obviously you have this fixed deformity now of the toe. So as you can see, I've taken all the overlying callus off and there's a small corn, and you can see from the changes in the appearance of it, kind of where the corn is sitting. These can be really painful. The corns often feel like you have, like, say, a piece of glass stuck in your foot or, you know, a stone in your shoe. They really are uncomfortable. And the corns themselves, when you remove them, are just like glass. They're really, really firm and painful. So I'm just finicky getting it all out. And so I know when I've got it all out, because the base of the corn feels a lot softer and spongier. So if I can feel anything firm or hard with my blade, I know there's a little bit more to come. But it is a fine line between nicking somebody, so going that a little bit too far, and getting it all out so that they're comfortable for as long as you can get them. And around the edges there, that's just bits of hard skin. Obviously with this gentleman I've done all the other bits and pieces for him, like his nails, smoothed his heels off so there's no like cracks or catchy bits. But I've omitted that from the video to focus just on the corns. So that's that one done. Now this is a different gentleman. Now, unfortunately, I got a bit giddy and I actually did his other foot first, which had an even better corn. And I promised to bring that to you on his next visit to us. So this is his right foot, because I usually start with the left. And as you can see, you've got a good hint of the corn sitting under that huge chunk of callus. And as I remove the callus there, you can just see the outline there of the nucleus of the corn. So those of you who've watched my videos previously, you'll know that we call that central core, we call it a nucleus. And it's actually a different kind of hard skin cell, which forms in a upside down cone shape, so the pointy end into the foot. And like I was just saying, they can be really, really hard. Now, when I was removing the gentleman's other corn on the other foot, it was a really big, beefy one. Well, he had two on that foot. And I actually cut it out and gave it to the gentleman. And he's proudly taken that home with him, a little memento of his visit. Although this one is still a really chunky sized corn, this was significantly shallower than the one on his other foot. So big apologies, but he has promised me he'll let me grab him another time and we can video that foot then for your viewing pleasure. So loads of sort of chunks of hard skin around this area. Now, similar reasons to the last gentleman, when you get retraction of toes for whatever reason, and there will be biomechanical issues going on, which means that the way that the foot is functioning isn't ideal. So you're getting increased amounts of pressure over this particular area, and that isn't normal. So often insoles and things like that can help to redistribute that pressure a little bit more evenly, so that it's been like taken more across the other ball joints, which we call met heads. But any retraction of the toes, like we say, as you get that bending of the toe with the knuckle coming up higher, that actually brings the ball joint, that met head, lower. And when that comes lower, you get then that fatty pad, which is your kind of natural cushioning pad that sits over those ball joints. That kind of sits that little bit higher, so it starts to gather, if you like, underneath the toes more. Well, that's all well and good if all the pressure was underneath the toes, but it's not. It's on the met heads. So that's when you get the corn formation. And there's the corn there. I've just taken it out for you. So yeah, the retraction of the toes causes increased pressure over these areas. So there are various things that we can do in the future, and like I say, insoles is one of them to help support the function of the foot in functioning a little bit more like it ideally should, and so that will help to spread pressure a little bit more evenly across the forefoot there. Try and address any retraction of the toes. This gentleman already has a degree of kind of fixing of the joints, but they are still relatively mobile. So like I say, if these things don't go unchecked for years and years and years, we are able to do less and less. So ideally we like to get these toes while there is still a good amount of mobility in them, so that we can reduce any problems kind of down the line. But obviously when you have retraction of toes, you get the toes pressing on the shoes and the downward pressure of the shoe on the knuckles, and you can get corns and callus formation on the tops of the toes there. So addressing this retraction actually, can reduce pain in many different areas, rather than it just like kind of looking a little better. It really makes a difference. But all of these problems are caused by pressure being in the wrong place. You can see I'm jabbering on now because I'm chatting and waving my blades around. Consummate professional. At some point I will get back on my job. There we go. So like I say, this one is still pretty deep, and I get a feel with my blade as to how much further I can go. But I want to remove as much as I can, and that will just make life a lot more comfortable for longer. And I've advised this gentleman to come back to me sort of no longer really than about 2 months, in 2 monthly intervals, because he is on his feet a lot with his job, and the function of his foot means that he is very much prone to these really bad corns. As you can see, the colour has kind of changed a little bit now. So you can see there's like a whiteness around that core of the corn. That's what we call maceration. So that's where the tissue gets soggy and kind of takes on board water. And that makes the tissue a lot more rubbery and spongier. And as you can see, a bit more of the corn there. But yeah, it's, from my perspective, it's not as easy to take off, but from the sort of body's perspective, it's kind of a way of, sorry, I must be jabbering on here, ever the professional. But yeah, so it's the body's way of kind of, by getting fluid into the tissues, it makes that callus softer, so that a little bit more comfortable. What we can see though is, well, say with some people, if their tissue integrity isn't that good, so if you're older or if you have health conditions that kind of mean that your tissues don't repair so easily, this gentleman's quite young, so his tissue viability is pretty reasonable. But in someone who's older, or someone who has like diabetes or any other health issue like rheumatoid arthritis, their tissues won't cope anywhere near as well with this kind of pressure. And what you find is you get maceration, but then you start to get bleeding into the tissues and ulcerations. So that means where the tissue becomes kind of disorganized and non-healing, it becomes a wound. They can be quite hard to manage depending on where the wound is and why it's there, and we really need to get some offloading of those areas. So there's that spongy kind of rubbery tissue there. Like I say, I quite like it when the tissue is harder. It's much easier for me generally to get off, but when it's rubbery there, it tends to be because it has been a really whopper of a corn. So thank you again for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we will see you again next week. Bye.